right, I'm gonna press record.
We haven't got a quorum yet, then. Where's Kathy? We need Kathy.
Mine is my first and my last name.
Barb,
I can't
no,
do
no,
anything.
no, is Kathy coming?
Oh, sorry.
You're in charge of Kathy. Is
I'm in
Kathy-
charge of Kathy, and I was at a meeting.
Record. It was recording for a while.
Okay.
Okay. Now,
All right, ready to open the meeting of the
Yes.
City of Green Bay Redevelopment Authority. Roll call, please.
All right, Chair Gary Delvaux,
Here.
Vice Chair Matt Schuler,
Here.
Alderperson Barbara Dorf,
Here.
Jim Blumrick has to be excused, Debbie Dean. Kathy Hinkfuss has to be excused, and Melanie Parma
Well, there we go.
has to be excused. All right,
I guess bottom line, we got a quorum.
we have a quorum.
Approval of the agenda for today's meeting.
So moved.
Matt and Barb.
A second.
All those in favor, sing by saying aye. Aye. Agenda approved. Approval of minutes from our July 4th, 2019 regular meeting.
Second.
Motion made by Matt, second by Alderdorf. All those in favor, sing by saying aye.
Aye.
The minutes are approved. Regular order business. Consideration with possible action to approve preliminary concept plan for the shipyard at 100 West Mason Street, tax parcel 2-78.
All right, so I'm gonna try and do a presentation
okay, just give me 1 second.
somewhere. Right here? Yeah, we could, but you can get into that folder, so we should be all good.
Why is it? Give me 1 second. Come on, podium.
Here, what time is it?
Okay, so sorry. Just give me, hold on.
I cannot get in.
Okay.
Yes.
It is mine.
Hot mic?
Yep.
All right, ready to go. So what I'd like to do today, as you know, we've been working for quite some time on the shipyard redevelopment plan. Had some fits and starts, different ideas, things come and gone. But I think, we're on track to really, as we've talked about, make this a premier recreational entertainment facility for the community, and also, provide an opportunity for entrepreneurship at the spot, but then also, stimulating investment in the neighborhood and further redevelopment. So I actually have a number of items that deal with the shipyard today. But first, I wanted to go over and get RDA's direction in terms of moving forward on a plan for the RDA piece of the shipyard, the south side of the slip. And so just a little bit of history. This is probably about a year ago. We had talked about, all right, the baseball team left, we're not going to build a stadium there, what are we going to do with that site? And so RDA directed staff to work with the consultant. We contracted with Cunningham out of Minneapolis and really kind of talked through, like, what could this space potentially be? And, we walked through and basically got our arms around this concept of, providing more amenities at the site. And, as you saw through some of the renderings, the focus was still on this, kind of field stadium concept that, initially could be used for smaller events, but reserved space to be able to grow into a stadium in the future. But then also looked at some waterfront amenities and really was the first iteration of this concept we called the container park. Kind of this area we thought about providing a space for pop-ups, entrepreneurs, especially in, food, beverage, and retail, and having this space in the community, but here's a way to get them involved and provide them that spot right in between, the garage and full brick and mortar establishment, and really, tying to that entrepreneurism that was in our community. And so we basically, kind of took this concept and through the last few months have been working both internally and externally with the public to refine this really into the next step is to create some documents for construction to actually move forward and build this. So one of a few of the things that we found in our discussions using this concept plan, one, too much wide open space. There was a feeling that, okay, this was really just kind of a single use field. And if it wasn't being used, the place is going to feel really empty. Great when there's an event there, you know, if you're playing football or soccer or having some type of festival, but when it wasn't occupied, it was almost too open and too vast. Other than that, there really wasn't a ton of public support. People weren't looking for additional places really to play sports. Secondly, the parking. You know, there's a lot of surface parking. A lot of this area, I mean, its prime waterfront area was dedicated to parking. And we felt, given, you know, that room under the Mason Street overpass and in the adjacent Broadway district, and we talked about building some parking lots really in that wedge between Broadway and the rail yard, there wasn't a need for as much, you know, surface parking on the site. This could be a higher and better use. I think we're trying to balance, you know, providing some parking to allow people to, you know, who are unfamiliar with the site to get there and easily access it, but that could be provided in a better spot maybe than right on the site itself. And then the third was this container park and some of these waterfront amenities. I mean, people really were excited about this. It was something new, and they wanted to see, you know, more of this and more things, more activities. And really, I think, you know, this first step, we moved from a sports field and a stadium to a multi-purpose kind of functional area. And I think people wanted to see even more of that. You know, more reasons to go, you know, really appeal to a wider range of ages and demographics. So the last few months we worked with Stantec. We have contracted with them to provide consulting services really to figure out how to develop this concept plan, refine it, and move into something that is really going to be great for the community. So here is where we are at as of today. And I just want to walk through some of the elements where we've been and where we're coming to today and what we hope to do moving forward. So some of the features on here, you'll see that big athletic field has morphed into what we'll call the Great Lawn. And instead of being a flat surface, it's a gently sloped surface to allow for you know, better use for festivals and concerts. You'll see at the lower left-hand area, there's a spot for setting up a stage. You know, our hope here is to still have, you know, major concerts and festivals that attract 10,000 people on this spot. Right south of the stage is a little lookout area, you know, to kind of get a view of the river and the downtown area. As you'll see in the, now I know the orientation's a little off, but the bottom right corner, which would be the northeast corner, you know, we refined some of those waterfront amenities. So putting in some sand for a volleyball court, an urban beach, having a space for a splash pad or a play fountain, also an area for just lounging with hammocks and canopies for being in this area. As you work your way into the cove to the west, we have some reserved space for a playground. This isn't going to be the playground that you find at any of our parks in the community. We really want something cutting edge, artistic. You know, so we're thinking something like Maggie Daly Park in Chicago, or the Container Park in Las Vegas, or Domino Park in New York City. I mean, these are things that are going to draw crowds in terms of being something totally different. Then also up near the western edge, we have a dog park. People like dogs. And we're looking for spaces, especially on the west side, so we feel this is a way that if you're coming here just for the dog park, you can come in and use it, but also just a way to introduce animals into the space in a good way that really flows. And again, have another destination for dog owners in this area. And then at the far west end is our container plaza. That's our container park, where we're going to have a set of containers set up, again, structured in different ways, different build-outs, you know, some with the kitchen, some just for a bar, some just for retail space, some just for hanging out or shelter space, and then tying that into a beer garden up in that area, really to kind of create this open-air market plaza feel that becomes a destination for food, beverage, and entertainment. And then also just, you know, kind of following along the cove, we'd like to do some environmental restoration. At the west end of the cove, we're looking at some options for wetland restoration. And also, you know, throughout as you go around then the breakthrough side on the north end of the slip, having that public pathway all the way through and working on this naturalized edge. We felt it's really important for people to be able to get down to the water, to touch the water. If you've been out there right now, you don't have to go down very far to get to the water. But again, over time, those lake levels will go down. But really providing some access. There's not a lot of great public access on the west side or for west side residents. So we really felt it was important to provide those opportunities to get down to the water. For fishing, you also see the marina and a kayak launch. To really kind of integrate this site into the water as well. So I just want to kind of take then just a quick tour through what some of these are looking like. I just went through some of those. So one, this urban beach area. People are really supportive of areas just to kind of go and relax. This is not going to be like the beach at Bay Beach. This is more just kind of designed to be an element of surprise, kind of in an urban context. Well, we got all the sand and umbrellas and things. So, providing this area just to kind of go hang out, whether it's parents or your kids or bring your food down here and just kind of relax down by the waterfront and in a playful space and a space that really fits in to the rest of the area. Behind to the left, you can kind of see an area in the trees. Our hope is to get a lot of mature trees in this area and provide some shade, putting in some hammocks and canopies and another place really to, relax or picnic and enjoy the site. At the top, we're looking at creating a beer garden concept. I think that's been popular in other communities. We have a few in the city, but I think important in terms of providing that social space, that community space, and really tying the container park into the water. Mm-hmm. And that important area where you can have beverages responsibly, do it with the family, but then also take advantage of all the rest of the amenities that are at the site. In here too, you'll see some just placeholders. We really feel it's important to get public art into this site. So we've identified a lot of locations, for that public art. You can see there's red dots all over, really kind of at the entranceways, prominent vistas, and just really making sure that we incorporate art into the site, like we've done on the east side of the river, along the trail there as well. And then finally, the container plaza. Again, I think this is a unique amenity that doesn't exist here in the community, and we really like to build something, of substance, and really kind of stacking these containers, providing restaurant beverage space on the first floor, retail space, but then also providing, space for just relaxing, lounging, or potentially even rentable space. A lot of decks and open plazas that you could use either for concerts or festivals or just every day. So this is, early. Again, this is just a concept. It's not going to look exactly like this, but kind of gives you a sense of the size and scope of what we're looking to build here. Kind of going back to some of our earlier conversations, given some of the limitations of the site with the environment and geotech, putting containers on the site, it's a lot easier build. And also a little more flexible in terms of the future, how we want to shape things forward. So, again, altogether, just we really feel this is maximizing the use of the space, provides amenities for all sorts of different demographics to be able to use this site and really kind of flow together and interact in a good way. And this is just kind of stepping back a view to see how it all flows together. So with that, we'd like to present that before you today and get some direction for continuing to move forward on the path. We're having an open house, I believe, next week. Is that correct?
Yeah, Wednesday.
Next Wednesday. We're going to be at the Farmers Market Wednesday night and at Old Fort Square. Kind of getting some additional feedback from the public. Look, is this what you said you wanted? And kind of making those fine-tuned tweaks before we start moving into the phase of designing for construction.
I know you're gonna get a lot of input from the neighbors, et cetera. What type of numbers are we talking about as far as people providing input? Were you able to get a lot of input?
So far, I think if you count the people that came to our public meetings, did surveys, all the other contacts, were probably over 1,000.
Very good. Good.
Mm-hmm.
Good representation.
Yeah, and I think it was really, I don't have the exact numbers, but when we had one of our open houses down at the Cup of Joy, there were actually a lot of residents and business owners from the neighborhood, ones who are going to be directly impacted from it. I think that was really important to get their feedback. I know our team here has done a lot of work in the neighborhood, going door to door, both the businesses and the residents, as we talk about some of the other items on here today. So we've really been, engaged with the neighborhood and We feel that, another opportunity to provide some comment, but that are moving forward with what the public wants to see here.
Could you go back to the original picture, first one? Yeah, that one. The walkway along the river, to me, is so important. So I obviously see it to the right, and it goes all along there, and then it goes around the slip. I presume it goes to the left as well, the walkway.
Yes, so it
People
will
have
go, it will go all the way around, so you'll be able to access the walkway. I didn't talk a ton here, but underneath Mason Street is where we'd like to do some of the parking spaces. We think there's enough room for over 100, probably 120 spaces
Wow.
underneath there. So to be able to access it, whether driving or walking from Broadway, you can come in under Mason Street, you can come down Arndt Street around the Breakthrough property, or you can come down Bridge Street. So there'll be 3 opportunities, and those will all be interconnected. I will say we went back and forth a lot with the bridge over the slip. Bridge might look cool, but could also be expensive and could also inhibit, movements of boats and other traffic in and out of there.
Right.
With that, it's really not that far of a walk around the edge in terms of where you're going. And I think depending on where you come from, it's nice to have kind of that out of the way walk in terms of providing some more coverage, some shorefront in that area. So that's why we left it out. That might have been talked about in some earlier plans.
Okay. RD members, or actually, I have no problem opening up to the public if that's what the group wants to do. Matt, you must have a question.
And I do, Gary. So just first is, this plan is really different than I think anybody has started with in the first concept. And I'm assuming it got there through public hearings, but would probably like to hear a little bit more about how it got shaped through that process.
Sure.
Because that to me is just really important, that, the concept is there because.
Sure. I can talk a little bit about, I'd say probably the biggest morphing came from our first public meeting that we had, which was, winter of last year, was that December? So we had it right before the holidays, and basically that is a large meeting that we had. Stantec helped facilitate it, and we had, 6-8 stations around the room, looking at the different elements. And from that, people could go on and put little stickers on things they'd like to see and rank things that really they didn't want to see there. And then also there was a survey that was sent to business owners, hard copy, and then published online. We got a lot of responses from that. A lot of it was photo preference surveys, so we'd show an image of a certain type of playground, and people would say I really want to see that here, or this totally doesn't belong here. Okay. And so, through that, how many survey responses?
Over 600.
Okay, so a pretty
Wow.
substantial amount. And when we started compiling the data, things started to sort themselves out, and we kind of rank ordered, what people wanted to see and what they didn't. So some of the things that went to the side, in winter, people didn't want to see snowmobiles and ATVs and that kind of heavy use. But then in some of the summer sports, people really didn't have favor with another athletic facility. People said I really don't care about playing sports. I think if you look, and again, I've talked about this before about demographics, most don't have kids. And so, you're talking about, the soccer moms and dads who are going to come maybe and watch. It's a very small demographic, and we have other facilities that can handle those types of uses. And people were looking for things that we just don't have necessarily in the city. So based on that public meeting and those surveys, that really, made us internally have some discussions, and we discussed internally in our projects teams, and we discussed with the mayor's development team in terms of the department heads about, starting to shift a little bit away from an initial stadium. And I think we got some support from that, both seeing one, listening to what the public wanted, but then also, part of the challenge in this is, we're just talking about the plan here, but long-term operation and maintenance. Mm-hmm. And we didn't know that if we could, like we had previously, find that, long-term, high-paying tenant to use that sports facility. And for us, that was a lot of risk placed on just one element of it. So instead of just relying on one tenant really to come in and help support, paying the bills in terms of, for a football team or soccer team or other things like that, we really felt that was too much of a risk, and so that kind of supported the decision to move towards more of this mixed-use space. take the sports out of it, people still wanted festivals and they still wanted concerts. And so that's why we still have this lawn space, really that can be designed for that.
And then my other question would be, it's easy in July to think about the use of this space and the way it's set up. Was there discussion about winter?
Yes.
Okay.
So some of the things that we've talked about as far as the container plaza goes, how that can be designed and built and oriented to have winter functions, be open in the winter. I mean, initially just starting with the Christkindl market kind of concept of being open even longer. We've talked about having areas for skating, either on the Great Lawn or potentially even in the slip. We've talked about other events and festivals that we could do here in the winter months. If we maintain it right, I mean, the dog park can be open, maybe not going to be doing so much volleyball and beach stuff, but in terms of having some of these other winter festivals that we have, this would be another outlet for it. It probably won't be as much programming as right, spring, summer, fall, but yes, that was given some specific consideration to doing things in the winter months.
Okay.
Alder Johnson, I very much appreciate your comments.
Sure. Go from here.
Give me a second. Okay.
Thank you, Gary. So a couple things. First off, I want to really thank staff. For those not aware, this is in my district, and this is a project that I've worked very closely with staff, and I really want to commend them because they've put a lot of time and effort and energy to really understanding what the public wants and what their needs are as well, and they've been very responsive to that feedback. As you guys saw from the rendering that's been presented today, it is dramatically different than what was first brought forward. And while some of the amenities might be similar, the overall layout and design is very different. And so I think that's a credit to the staff for really listening to the public and to the neighborhood for what's really needed in that area. So, and I think what's important is when I look at the site, a couple things. One is, and I also just want to add that they've actually kept me in the loop, and I've been a part of a lot of the meetings, and so it's been very refreshing to see, our ability, I guess, to really be a part of that process, and so I want to thank staff for that as well. But a couple things. One is, what I like about the facility is that not only does it serve as a venue that can attract people into that area, but more importantly, it serves as a great amenity for the neighborhood. And so you'll see things, with the play areas, with the open grass area, the park, access to the waterfront. Those are all things that the residents of that area would thoroughly enjoy, in addition to folks that might go out of their way. I really appreciate the incorporation of public art. Public art is something that Green Bay has been a little slow to catch on to, but I think you're starting to see a lot of momentum build around that. Every great neighborhood, every great district that you see across the country starts with public art. And so I think it's a really great thing to see the level of commitment to public art. The container park has always been a source of interest of mine for a few reasons. And I think most notably the initial rendering that came out kind of just, hey, let's plop 6 containers here. And I don't think that, from my perspective, that 6 containers was enough of a draw for that facility to really make an impact. And so, again, I applaud staff for really being receptive and listening to that feedback, not only from the public, but I probably gave them an earful many times about how I think we need to create some additional density down there. And I think that while the container park at this point is just a rendering, they've, again, been very responsive to that feedback and understanding that if you don't have the density there, that it won't create the level of attraction that you want to see out of this level of investment from the public. Just a couple things, and of course, it's like anything, right? You create this wish list, and you can't necessarily have everything you want, but a couple bits of feedback is I do, when I look at the beach, and of course, it's tough to visualize on a map versus what you see in real life. On the map, I wish the beach was a little bigger, but in real life, I'd have to really lay it out to determine if it's got a large enough footprint to serve as that attraction. The staging and infrastructure, and I know I did talk to Kevin with this, and Kevin, I see that you did move the stage compared to where it was initially. I just really want to make sure that we're consulting some folks to determine if that is the appropriate location for the stage, because for those involved in large-scale events, it's not just, hey, put the stage there. It's really, you got to have great access points, access to permanent power, which I think is really important to the site, and I know Kevin has listened to that feedback and has acted appropriately. So, but it is just a thing that I do want to point out is the location of that is really important. I really do appreciate the removal of the athletic field. I think the feedback from the public was that this wasn't something that was of high value. And so I like the alternative that's been presented. It gives us a lot more options for programming throughout the year. And I think that's an important piece that as we look to make this a year-round facility, you want to be able to do that. And that's another thing with the container park that I've been very adamant about, is wanting to see year-round containers as well. So that's going to mean things like heating and insulation and all that additional investment, but I think long-term it will serve the community much more effectively. And then I guess the last comment that I would make is I think when I look at Light Park is a bit of a nuisance in terms of the amount of geese that patronize that area. And they leave little gifts behind for us. And so I think it's really important that as we look at this site, that we try to be proactive about addressing that from a maintenance perspective. And my hope is that maintenance is more than just, let's send someone out to pick up goose droppings every day. My hope is that we can take a look at some strategies that have been implemented in other communities from a design perspective to keep those visitors out. And in particular, just a consultant or an expert, I should say, that I consulted just the other week, was a lot of times having a border or a barrier that separates the water from your grass area and disrupts that visual is oftentimes what can do that. And so I know that on the original plan, we've got some trees there. I think it might be worthwhile to at least consider or do some additional consulting on what that would look like if maybe we removed those trees and had some type of visual barrier to the water to keep the geese from landing and enjoying the facility without paying taxes. So,
Thank you. Mr.
There
Mayor?
are.
Yeah, just
So-
to echo a few of the comments that were made, appreciate Alder Johnson's comments and the presentation provided by Dr. Vonk. Thanks to staff for all of their involvement. It's notable, I think, the evolution that has taken place with regard to this plan. And so it's a real credit to staff to sort of trust the input that they received, both online and in person, and really act on them. I think to some extent, the multi-use sports facility was a bit of a hangover from, what was thought to be possible there. So just a credit to all involved, alders and staff and the former mayor to kind of trust what was being presented to them and move forward with a slightly different vision. Also, just to make the point that, this has the potential to be much more productive from a tax increment perspective as well, than obviously a multi-use field. If this container park is as successful as we hope it to be, I think we have the opportunity to have a number of different tenants offering all kinds of different businesses there to the public. So I think that is certainly notable, that hopefully we're going to be generating more revenue than we might have with a previous design. But very excited about this concept, very supportive. Looking forward to more input though from RDA, from public, from council as we move down the path.
Deb, Alderdorf, any comments?
I love it, and I've been excited about it since the beginning, and now I'm even more excited about it. So, and I'm so happy. I mean, the one thing I wanted to see was a water feature, because I know that's something that people love. And with Red Smith Construction this summer, there's no real water park, and that's been a really concern for people. People love those little water fountain things, so I'm really excited. Will it be done by like next year?
So that is our hope. If you noticed, we were supposed to start moving dirt out there, but it's been a little wet, which is like the whole purpose of why we're moving dirt out there, to get it out of the floodplain. But if we are able to kind of get our arms around the concept and get Stantec, really to kind of move this into construction documents, yes, our hope that we'd be able to move forward with that and have this open next year.
That's pretty awesome.
I'm glad that there was a look at future demographics in consideration for what you're doing, because it is estimated I think by the year 2030, 83% of households will be childless. So, yeah, I mean, it's a really big statistic. I mean, looking forward, I know that from looking forward to developing housing, that type of thing, but also who's going to be patronizing this as the years go by. So I think it's a really great move.
No other questions or comments? I entertain a motion.
I move to approve.
I will second that.
Alderdorf, move to approve, Matt, second. Any other questions or comments? Yes, Deb? Oh, if not, we shall vote.
Is it coming up?
I haven't.
No, it's not
Oh.
connected, so Deb, so.
Oh.
Okay, just like a roll
Jesse
call
will
vote?
have to tell you.
Okay.
There you go.
There we are.
I'm in, but, I mean,
It just came up. You voted, right?
Yeah, I voted.
So how,
Sure.
how can we record your vote? Yes.
yes. Should, okay, I'll try that.
Yeah, unanimous. Very good. Thank you. Thanks for everybody's input. Excellent job, staff.
It's exciting.
Deb? Very exciting. Number 2, consideration of possible action to draft and negotiate management agreements for the shipyard at 100 West Mason Street, tax parcel 2-78.
So, one of the things that came up, has been talked about during this process, is looking at, responsibilities for operation and maintenance of the facility. I know we looked at some different agreements with, past opportunities, but really wanted to kind of explore with RDA the approach that we should take. And with that, because it does involve potential negotiations, it would probably be most appropriate to do that in a closed session to get some direction on how we'd like to take that approach for the management agreement. What's that?
2:10 is up.
Okay, yes, and we will adjourn to 2:10 for closed session for this.
Okay. A motion to go in closed session?
Move to go into closed session.
Second.
Alderdorf and Deb. All those in favor, signify by saying
Oh,
aye.
you wanna read
Voice
the
vote.
You
language?
want me to read?
Oh, language, I'm
Yep.
sorry.
Sorry.
Yep, please.
Okay.
Sorry.
The authority may convene in closed session pursuant to sections 19.85, 1E Wisconsin statutes for the purposes of deliberating or negotiating the sale of public properties, investing into public funds, or conducting the other specified public business as necessary for competitive or bargaining reasons. The authority may thereafter reconvene in open session pursuant to section 19.852 Wisconsin statutes to report the results of the closed session and consider the balance of the agenda.
Roll call? Gary, yes. Alderdorf,
Yes?
Deb,
Yes.
and Matt.
Yes.
So we are in closed session.
Move to return to regular order of business.
Second.
Alderdorf and Matt, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We're back to regular order of business. Just to report out, we reviewed the various options and alternatives to maintaining the park, and we gave staff our input, and they're gonna proceed accordingly. So until anything else is decided, that's kind of where we're at. Thank you. All right, item number 3. Consideration of possible action on implementation of a curb appeal program for the shipyard investment strategy. Oh, there he is. Hi.
There, here's okay?
Yep,
Hi.
Oh, are we recording?
yes.
Okay.
All right, I don't know if you all remember me, I'm David Buckman, planner with the city. I worked with multiple staff members to kind of develop a new program, sticking with the shipyard theme, but this is into the neighborhood. So what you have in your packet is it's sort of even our internal document, so it kind of goes deeper into processes, but it's basically the Green Bay Curb Appeal Program. And it is an implementation item of the shipyard investment strategy, which was approved last year, basically trying to set some guidance for the $1 million the city plans to invest in the neighborhood over the next 3 years. So one of the implementation items was to research and identify gaps in existing programs and basically close those gaps. And one gap that we have found in the city is a program to address minor repairs and site improvements or site maintenance. We have major programs, Community Development Block Grant and some neighborhood enhancement that do larger projects. So if you need to redo your whole house or that type of thing. But small things make a huge difference. And curb appeal, sort of the name of it, curb appeal kind of lends that to what I'm talking about. Some landscaping, some minor painting, fixing of a small part of your porch, all those things collectively in a neighborhood really improve the aesthetics, the desirability to be outside and be social and be active, and kind of promotes a lot of the stuff that we're looking to do in the shipyard neighborhood, I should say. We did develop this program to fill that gap and to meet that objective. And I guess I want to point out it's not a cure-all. Again, this is for little things. It's an incentive program and an assistance program. It's not really meant to come in and fix all the problems. It's to encourage you and assist you in doing what you probably want to do anyway, but maybe can't afford to do it. So it is a grant program, but it's a matching grant program. So the homeowner, or property owner, I should say, would have to match 25% of the grant amount, and I'll get to what those are in a second. I'll try to keep this short. But it would be available to all residential properties, both owner properties and rentals, regardless if it's 1 unit, 2 units, 4 units. Again, the goal is to improve the aesthetics of the neighborhood, improve the properties. So whether that's ownership or not doesn't really make too much of a difference. It is limited to the shipyard area itself, and in your packet on page 2, there's sort of a map that shows the shipyard area. So I won't get into heavy detail, but it's the neighborhood just west of the shipyard formal. And why, there's some kind of discussion of why would we require a match and just not be a straight grant. There are several reasons for that. One is to ensure responsibility of the funds. Grant programs, easy to take grant money and just take it and use it.
Yes.
But it also generates that property owner buy-in. They're investing 25% in their rehab or their site improvement. Kind of gets a little more skin in the game for them as well. And also, we want to show that block grant money and neighborhood enhancement money are leveraging additional investment in our community. So that 25% is an additional leverage. So we can actually come back to the RDA and report this much investment has leveraged this much additional investment. And what we're really hoping for as well is, even though the grant amounts are going to be capped, people are going to be doing more improvements. And then, in most cases, you start seeing your neighbors doing something, you tend to want to do something, and it's a snowball effect. I mean, that is an overall goal, that this just kind of takes a life of its own as well. But this is sort of the start. So it is a capped grant program, and it goes into 3 categories. So one is landscaping, and that can be your lawn, planters, flower beds, trees or shrub removal, or pruning or installation, and that's capped at $1,000. So these are tiered as they kind of go up as complexity and cost of the projects go. The next is exterior building or structural rehab, and that can be for your primary building or accessory buildings. That would be $2,500 cap on that grant. That could be things as simple as painting and staining a portion or the whole house, doing some structural repairs like re-roofing, putting on a new porch, fixing, sunroom, whatnot. And then the third one would be site improvements, and that is a $5,000 cap, and those are mainly for your concrete work or asphalt work, walkways and steps, driveways and aprons, but also stuff like fencing. Now again, these are limited to the shipyard, and the other caveat is they have to be visible from the street. So you can't be doing things on the back of your property to get the grant. I mean, you can have that as part of your project if you're siding your house anyway, still get the grant if you're doing the back, as long as you're doing the sides and the front as well, or at least one of the sides or the front. A lot of the work in this grant program as well, the way it's structured, could be done by a homeowner themselves, painting, landscaping. So it's a reimbursement. You would have to purchase the product or hire the laborers to do it, bring us the bills, and then we would reimburse you. So when you look at sort of the process in here, there's a big detail on the stages. The pre-pictures, the application, the progress reports, and then the follow-up from staff to make sure it was done properly, and all that before you get reimbursed. That is basically the nuts and bolts of the program. It's in a lot more detail than what you have. The only other thing I would like to add is that right now this is shipyard only, and it is tied to the investment strategy and those funds. If we see great success in this program, this could be something that could be expanded throughout the community. So really kind of think of it as a pilot. It was the first year, first time something like this is happening in the city for these types of purposes. And, you know, could be tweaked, but hopefully could be expanded. So if you have any questions.
Sounds like a very practical program. Is it modeled after something else? I mean,
There is models all over the country of
Okay.
different names.
I
Yeah.
figured that. Very good. Deb? question?
No, I'm just saying, yeah, there's lots of models, and they're very, very effective.
Yes, yes. Yeah,
Um,
figure out a way to see
No,
that.
I love
Fire
the
from
part
everywhere.
where there's, you know, you have some skin in the game, so you're paying with the grant. And I'm sorry, I was getting some help. But
That's right.
I looked at all the things that people have to submit and such. And I'm a very organized person, and that seemed like, okay, that's a lot, and everybody isn't. And so is there somebody that kind of holds people's hands along the way to try to help them with all the required information for reimbursement, the photo documentation, the copies
Sure.
of receipts, you know, that kind of thing?
Oh, definitely, and it's
Okay.
no different than we do like with our home rehab programs that are currently in operation. I mean, we have staff, Ken, Kevin, Krista, there's
Good.
Stephanie, there's a lot of staff that help people through the process. I mean, people come at different degrees of sophistication and
Exactly,
sometimes
that's
need a
what I
little
was
more
concerned
hand-holding,
about.
but,
Yeah.
and it sounds like a lot, but, you know, pictures aren't that hard to take, especially nowadays with, you know, phones and
Yeah,
whatnot.
but everybody, you know, everybody doesn't have a smartphone. Well,
So-
most people do.
Yeah, and we'll learn from this first year of doing it. You know, if things need to be tweaked next year, that's, you know, that's kind of what a pilot's about, right?
And really,
I
there's
just
a,
wanted to make sure
Yeah.
people are helped. That's-
Oh, for sure,
that was my
for
main
sure.
thing, because I think it's a very good program. I really like it.
and it's a program with a lot of incentive, really, for 25% investment. You're getting a
Sure, I
good
mean,
return,
even something as simple as landscaping, $1,000 of landscaping, you're only paying $250.
right?
I'd do that. I don't live in the shipyard, but maybe I'll move just because of that. I need a new driveway.
Questions or comments?
Yeah, and
Matt,
that's,
please.
actually, I've got a question or comment kind
Sure.
of to that, and that's probably more the way I was thinking, this is very generous. And I hope it's wildly successful and we love it. Are we concerned at all about it getting abused? And here's the scenario that runs through my head. There is a contractor who understands the program is in place and starts knocking on doors in the neighborhood. Hey, by the way, I can get you, for $200, I can get you $1,000 of work done. And their price is very inflated. And just literally, the next thing we know, we've got a contractor submitting 500 projects in the neighborhood. And I'm probably right, but you get the gist, right?
Sure.
Because it's so generous, I am a little concerned about the opportunity for abuse.
Well, I mean, there always is that, but again, from a staff standpoint, we deal with that right now with our contractors with rehab. I mean, our staff is pretty educated on what things cost. And if numbers are coming in heavily inflated or deflated, depending on the scenario, we can catch those.
Does this process give you the ability to screen that up front?
Yeah, they would have to supply their bids
Okay.
prior to it being approved, the grant being
Okay.
approved.
Because that to me is the only drawback that I can see, and I'm glad it's a pilot and, you know,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, I think it's very generous.
Yeah, well, the goal is to make an impact,
Yep.
right? And to spend $1 million. So we purposely made it generous.
Yep.
So yes, hopefully it's a great success.
Any other comments or, yes, Old Johnson?
It's just another project that I really want to commend staff on. I know they've put a lot of hard work into this, and I appreciate them as well, having me involved with this process. And the one thing in particular that I want to point out with this is, oftentimes, you know, what you see in the front page are the significant investments. And while we are looking at some of those, I mean, obviously, I mean, the shipyard on the riverfront is certainly case in point of that, but we've also looked at some larger purchases in that area. You know, maybe buying a home or a redevelopment of a home that can sometimes take up a little bit larger price tag. Oftentimes, it's the collective impact of many small projects that can transform a neighborhood. And so what I really value about this particular program is that we didn't just rest on one idea. Staff has come up with other ideas. There are several others I know that haven't been released publicly yet that they're working on that I would anticipate you're going to see in the very near future. But what I like about this is it creates an accessible opportunity for all of those that live in that neighborhood. The other component, I think, that David, when you first proposed this, that there was, I don't want to say pushback, but some people were like, hey, what about this, which was the allowing of rental properties to be eligible for this. And I think it's important to note that probably more than 50% of the properties within this footprint area are rental units. And so for us to completely leave them out of the program, I think would be a mistake. Our goal is to beautify the neighborhood, which includes every property. So I am grateful that we did include that piece within this plan as well.
With all those comments, I'll entertain a motion.
I move that we move forward with this program and approve it.
Motion by Alder Dorf,
I'll second it.
second by Matt. All in favor, sing by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, so carried. Excellent, thank you. Thanks for all your hard work. Number 4, C2. Consideration of possible action of resolutions designating the Redevelopment Authority to perform all acts necessary for creating, amending, and/or closing tax incremental districts TID 5, 7, 8, 9, 12, 13, 14, 17, 22, and 23. I know there's been a lot of meetings on this lately, hasn't there?
There has, and I don't know if it's out of order, but if you'd like to maybe take up E1, information of the annual tax increment district
Oh.
updates, I think it might be helpful for Director Ellenbecker and I to kind of talk through
Okay.
the status of the TIDs, because that would explain what
Right.
we're doing and why these
Yeah, makes
resolutions
sense.
are here.
A motion to do E1 before number 4.
So moved.
Matt, Alderdorf,
Second.
all those in favor, sing by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, so carried. E1. Well, thank you. I wish Mr. Bloomreck was here. He's our TID expert, but we'll get by. Debbie knows all about TIDs.
Yeah, I was even planning to do just kind of like we did for JRB.
Thank you.
Probably less questions, yeah. Thanks. All right, guess
Downloading.
downloading. Right, sorry, these super huge files, it's all these pictures.
Well, how I can get started. Diana Ellenbecker, Finance Director. Annually, we have a report that's due to the Wisconsin, the Department of Revenue, and it's a recap of what happened for the prior fiscal year in our TIDs. So what we have is really a recap of the reports that were submitted to the Department of Revenue. And again, we had a joint review board meeting in the end of June to get approval on these reports.
So one of the things that we talk about in terms of reporting, these are all for year-end 2018. So at the end of the year 2018, it's basically the status of where things are at, and we have to report out to the Joint Review Board by July, basically the status of where things are. Presenting it here, kind of the same report, but then I think it helps provide some context in terms of why we're proposing some of the following actions for these certain TIDs. So I think what we're going to go through and do is look at each of the tax increment districts. Director Ellenbecker can talk a little bit about the financial situation, and I'll provide some information on some of the projects that are going on in each of those tax increment districts.
To give you a real quick overview of the report you have in front of you. Did they all get one of these?
That was in the packet. There's a table that was in the
Yeah.
packet, a spreadsheet that basically lists the TIDs. It talked about year-end balance,
Right.
increment, expenses, revenues.
Right, I just wanted to talk about that report. Every report that was submitted to the state was a 3-page report, so by the time you had all the TIDs, it ends up being a lot of paperwork and it was harder to read. So we have put a summary together, and that's the page that you're seeing. Yep, and I just want to explain how it works. You know, all the TIDs are on the left-hand side. As you go across, it kind of shows the creation, the name of the TID, the creation date, the mandatory term date. It'll tell you what the fund balance was as of the beginning of the year for 2018. Then it shows you the different revenues that came in for that TID. Then it shows the expenditures for that TID, and then it'll show where it ended, the fund balance at the end of 18. The next 3 columns are guesses. We do a cash flow and a projection. on what we think are some of our future costs in that TID, and then we also show future revenues, which includes your tax increment and any other revenues, revenue sources that would come in, and that would show whether or not we believe that this TID will end up with a surplus or deficit. I will start with the TID 4 is our first one. If I look at the fund balance at the beginning of the year, we had about 193,000. We had tax increment of about 514,000. We had expenditures of mostly debt, and a couple other expenses, leaving us a fund balance of $180,000. So it went down slightly that first year, but as you can see, our future revenues well exceed our future costs. So this TID, it actually doesn't have much growth left in it, and I guess that's where I'm gonna turn it over to Kevin to talk about the TID. Any questions on the financials on TID 4?
No, so this TID, really it's come up the last few years as the Washington Commons project, now Riverside Apartments, converted. Originally it was a condo project, then it was an apartment project, and now all those apartments have slowly converted back to condos. And as they've converted back to condos, they've appraised higher, and it thus generated some additional increment. Part of the costs involved in TID 4 for the Cherry Street ramp, because that apartment project uses the ramp. We're using some of that increment to help pay the debt service on the Cherry ramp. So that's one I know was discussed about closure, but that's why it's still open, because we still have a few years left on the debt service for Cherry Street.
And then we can move on to TID 5, which is one of our older downtown TID. Started off with a negative fund balance of about $900,000. We had increment and other revenues that came in for the year. Increment was almost $8 million. You're also gonna see a large other borrowing. In this TID is where we borrowed $2 million for the shipyard, and that was mostly for land acquisition, and then also for our environmental for the shipyard. And then you'll see expenditures. That's also where you're gonna see the land purchase. Also debt service. So this did, because of the borrowing, we did end in a positive fund balance of about $398,000. Again, this is a situation where our expenses are about equal to the revenues. So this has been a lot of improvements that will probably just end up at just really as a slight surplus.
So some of the projects, Pete's Garage, this is a project we looked at back in 2016. They redeveloped part of the old International Harvester building into Pete's Garage. And then over the last year, they've expanded into the building to the south and provided some additional build out. So we'll start to see some of that increment from that project. Watermark, as you know, Foxconn purchased that last year, but prior to that, ISG had made an arrangement to move in, and now they're fully built out on the third floor. So after this year, we should see some additional increment for that building as well. If you recall, we terminated the development agreement because they hit their targets. The previous developer hit their targets for getting the assessed value up to where they needed it to be. So there's no more incentive in terms of this particular building, but there will be some additional increment coming from it. And then we'll talk about, I think, next month, Ken, Haddon Street lot, or 2 months, September. Kind of revisiting this spot in terms of kind of putting the request for proposals back out. But this is a spot where we hope to generate some additional tax increment in the future.
Yes.
Whether it fits into this TID or a future one, but that's another spot where we're looking for some additional revenue.
Good.
TID 7 is our Lombardi Ashland, really the Tundra Lodge original TID. Started at about the fund balance was about $248,000. As you can see, we have tax increment of about $731,000, and our debt service is only about $250 left in this for this TID, and the other miscellaneous expenditures. So at this point, we are sitting at a positive fund balance of about $712. As you see, this is a TID that's going to do very well. It has some future costs of $1.4 million, but we have future revenues about $9.4 to the mandatory term date of this TID.
Good.
You know that one?
No?
Okay. TID 8 is Berger and Morrow. That started at about $1.7 million. We had tax increment about $297,000. Only debt service about $167,000. So we had a positive fund balance slightly increased to $1.8 million. Again, a situation where we have still some debt outstanding on this TID. However, our future revenues are gonna exceed it and leaving this with a nice surplus.
Excellent.
TID 9 is our University Heights. This one hasn't done very well. We are sitting at about 1,462,000 as a negative fund balance. We have tax increment of 178. However, we had debt service that's over 218,000. So every year this TID is going slightly farther in the negative. It is, and it's going to continue for the remainder at this point without future development. It's kind of status quo.
This is one that I'll talk about at the end in terms
Yes.
of one of the
Yes.
Okay.
closure options.
We'll go on to TID 10, which is our Main and Mason. Had a positive fund balance of about 444,000, positive increment of about 98,000. We had some developer grant or pay-goes that we paid out about 84,000, some other miscellaneous, increasing that fund balance to about 539,000. As you can see, there's very few expenses left in this TID, about 480,000, but we're looking at future revenues about 3.2 million.
Good.
So this is TID has gone well.
One of the things that is now fully online, Maine 1901 project took some vacant areas. This is the redevelopment of the North Shore Bank, the RVs, and the Familia Dental. It's not completed. That's, as Director Allenbecker said, part of the pay-go on this. It's a low one. It's a minor one. But this is fully online now, so there was some additional development
Yes.
in this district.
Yes.
And then we go to TID 12, which is one of our best TIDs. Started with a positive fund balance of 4.6 million. We have about $1.6 million of tax increment coming in. We did incur some expenses of about $2.6 million. We bought some land in this area, and we also have some infrastructure expenses that are happening in this TID. Still so the fund balance went down to about 3.5 million, but as you can see, we have some future costs of about 10 million, with a future revenues of almost 20 million in this TID.
Aurora continues to, I feel, perpetually expand and
Which is
add
good, too.
additional revenues for us. So they're providing some increment. Willow Creek Health has been now fully online, and we had a development agreement with them. They have a pay-go yet for 2 more years after this, I believe, 2 or 3 more years.
3 more. Yep.
But they're fully online and operational. And then Nature's Way. I think
It's a beautiful looking spot.
right, can probably attest it looks a lot better than that right now, further along.
Depends on who you talk to.
All right.
Right, I'm
But
sure.
it looks a lot more taxable now.
Yes, exactly, a lot more taxable. So the building's up, they're working on the equipment right now, and that'll be, should be fully online by the first of 2020.
And then we go to TID 13, which is our more recent downtown TID. Started as a negative fund balance of 3.3 million. We have tax increment of over 2 million in that TID. We have expenditures or debt service about 1.5 and some other pilot pay-go, sorry. And so that fund balance is getting slightly better. It's still a negative 3.1 million. With some future costs of still about 28 million, but future revenue is about 45 million.
You heard we had a little hotel project open up.
Yes.
So that should be now fully online and assessed and generating some revenue for the district. Right, we've been through before. It's been performing very well. I'm very excited about that
Good.
addition to the downtown. And then Associated Bank Lot, although not in the TID, that's one of the things we want to discuss. We made the purchase with that, looking at it as a TID 13 expense, really to help provide the infrastructure needs that are needed in that district as the KI continues to expand and we have additional businesses coming into this area. And we all know the horizon for Main Street ramp is not too far away. We needed to provide short-term some parking solutions, but also long-term a development opportunity, which we talked
Yes.
about, and it's on later on this agenda. But we may look at an amendment to be able to have TID 13 cover this particular facility.
Good.
All right, we're going to TID 14, which is our North Broadway Larson Green area. Started with a negative fund balance of about 580,000. Some tax increment of 151. We also had some developer agreements that we got some revenue in of 208,000. Debt service. So this TID actually went farther negative of $1.1 million. But this is a situation. This is infrastructure for the North Broadway end. And the question is and the decision is do we want to go borrow, pay interest, or do we go in a negative fund balance, and then knowing that it's gonna come back out in a couple years. So this is a situation where we did not borrow the money, and so as you will continue to see, if you go farther down that line, for that TID, we still show future costs of about $7.7 million, but we are looking at, future revenues of about 13.7, so it will end in a surplus.
Good.
This TID is in of itself, most of the rail yard, basically, east of Broadway and north of Dousman. So you can see the buildings continue to be built out, C and D, fully built out and occupied. Now they're working on the buildings to the north, R, S, and T. And then also you'll see the first set of condos is going up, and those will be online by the end of the year. Also at the north, we talked about development agreement, TWG for Broadway Lofts, providing 109 units of affordable housing at the very far north end. They'll be set to break ground probably later this summer, and that will be fully online in 2021.
We move on to TID 16, that's our Military Avenue. That has a negative fund balance when we started at 583. We have increment of about 271,000, miscellaneous expenses and debt service, which brought the negative fund balance down to about 372. Again, situation where future costs are about 900,000, but we have future revenues about 6.1 million. So this one just needs some time, and it'll get back into a positive within the next couple of years.
One thing we're hopeful for in this area, Green Bay Plaza, we had a new owner last year who's been working on putting together a good tenant mix. As you can see, we've talked about many parcels, way too much parking than what you need. So hopefully some additional developable land out in that parking area. But with that, we've seen, as Director Allenbecker said, some other small gains as other small properties up and down this stretch have been improved.
Good.
TID 17 is very small TID. It's at a negative $61,000, small increment, few expenses, really relatively flat and very little activity in this TID.
This is one I talked a little bit about last year. We're in a little bit of litigation with the development agreement there. We hope to have that settled up by the end of the summer, and with that, then we'll be able to close this TID down and fund that gap.
TID 18, one of our more recent ones, which is our University Avenue. We are starting a negative fund balance of 937, tax increment of 328,000. We have some large developers grants. We paid out about 761,000 in 2018, leaving us a negative fund balance of 1.4. This is again a situation where we make the decision, do we want to pay the grant knowing the additional increment is going to come in the next couple of years, or do we want to borrow? And then we could turn this into a positive fund balance at this point, but then you're adding the interest costs for borrowing. This is also another one. We have about $8.3 million of expenses that are future projected costs, and yet we have future revenues of about 17 million to come in, so this one will end in a positive surplus based on our projections.
What is the latest of the meatpacking project?
So they have 2 buildings up.
They do.
It took them a little longer. They found, as I've talked about before, some surprises in the demolition, some hidden floors with hidden asbestos in the plant, so they were a little slower and a little more expensive in terms of taking down the building. But they were able to get 2 units up. They worked out an agreement with UW Green Bay, actually, to provide some student-focused housing.
Great.
Which they felt has gone really well, and so they'll continue to make progress on. All in, I think the agreement said 340 some units over 5 years. They'll probably beat that in terms of a timeline.
Okay.
But it seems to be going well, and again, the market's good for those types of rentals.
So 2 buildings are up out of how many?
Initially, I think I have to look 8 or 9. I have to look at the agreement
Okay,
again.
sorry.
There's about 340 to 360
Wow.
units all
Great.
in, and I want to say they have just over 100 online right now.
Excellent.
Also in that area, Festival Foods,
Yes.
almost fully developed. The grocery store, the small shopping center, Quick Trip are all built, and then we're working right now on a plan. The last parking lot in there, the temporary parking lot, the 4th parcel, should have some development come through this year.
Great.
Oh yeah, and then also, not part of a development agreement, but the DeKaiser lumber site, there's some development going on there. Plans have been approved to do some development for some additional apartments back on the very south side. That's kind of where the curve is on Clement,
Right.
in the back area there, so
Mhm.
that'll be providing some additional increment.
TID 19 is our newest one, our East Town Mall. Started with a negative fund balance of 33,000, just some administrative costs that we started off with. Had a few more expenses in 2018. So we're sitting at a negative $57,000, but we will have an increment that'll come in as a 1/1 of 19. Again, we actually know that number already, but this is through the end of 18. Expected total cost based on what we know of as of right now, we have about $5.1 million, and we think we'll have revenues of about 10.4. So at this point, based on the projections, we're looking at a positive surplus of about 5.2 million in this TID.
Easttown, the Cub Foods, thankfully no longer looks like this. If you've been out there, fully renovated, operating. Marshalls, Ross, PetSmart are in there, and then I think they just got their last tenant of the small space. So that has been fully done. Easttown, we continue to work with the developers on that. They've been informed, look, we'll probably have to come back through with another development agreement. We had an original one,
Right.
kind of got extended. They're still actively working on putting together a tenant mix. As you know, retail's tough to get that all together. So they're still continuing to work on it, but with that, they know that they'll probably have to come back through our bodies to revisit a new development agreement in terms of.
Does the developer actually own the building now?
Yes, yep. Mhm.
Okay,
Yep, they've owned it for some time.
all right,
They may look at potentially selling a portion of it to help move forward
Right.
with revenue to get the project off the ground.
yes,
So that could be a potential. It's a few odd kind of parcels in there. But with that, again, any new project would have to come through this body again in
Yes.
terms of the timing expired, but then also potential change in scope.
okay.
I don't have any financials yet on the TID 20.
So TID 20, we just started last year, so 1/1 of 2018 it became effective. This is our Whitney Park TID, so just the area to the east of Whitney Park. It was created to facilitate the development of a few projects. One, Whitney Park Townhomes, the fourth phase. So this is down in Van Buren and Pine. GB Real Estate Investments going through, taking out some older housing, and then also some properties that the RDA had. And so it would be 4 new townhomes in its place there. Probably got to update my picture now because they're done. 901 Main, right on Main Street itself. The parcel, 20 new apartment units, market rate apartment units coming online. That construction's underway. Those will be done this year. Whitney School is also under construction right now. The apartments are under construction. There'll be 22 apartment units and then 12 townhomes around the back. The apartment should be complete by the end of the year, and then the townhomes they hope to break ground on sometime in the coming weeks.
I understand there's lots of interest in all those projects.
Yes,
apartments,
so
condos.
there's a lot, and if you've been over that area, and you can just kind of stand in Van Buren and kind of look
Right.
to your left and look to your right, by next year there'll be 60, units, close to 60 new units online.
Mm-hmm. Good,
And then TID 21, we also created for Green Bay Packaging. You've been out there, you'll see the work is going on. I think most of the foundational stuff is in, but as we talked about, they'll be building a brand new paper mill. Then when that's complete, they'll be taking down the old mill. You've probably also seen they made an expansion of their box plant
yes.
out there. So still a few years before these are fully completed and online, but that project is well underway. Now some TIDs that we've talked about and we'll be talking about here in the future, TID 22, to create a new tax increment district for the shipyard, basically to encompass the parcels RDA owns and some adjacent ones around it. This is to facilitate the development of the shipyard. Our piece, it's also to facilitate breakthrough in their development of their new headquarters, which will go on the north side of the slip, as well as potentially some other projects in that area. And then we also are looking at creating TID 23. This is down by TID 7, the Lombardi Ashland TID. We'd like to create this TID, we'll call it the Legends District. And this is to facilitate the redevelopment of the old Brett Favre Steakhouse into the Legacy Hotel. This development agreement was approved the other month. So this will be starting construction within a few weeks after permits are approved, but they would like to be up and running next year. So, I just put in just kind of an update. I think Diana kind of talked about what we're required to report for the state year over year. I think one of the things that I always stress is, when we create a tax increment district,
Yes.
we should develop the heck out of it, right? Because we're basically asking these other entities to forego their taxes for a certain period of time, and that when they're done, they'll have more taxes coming back to them, right? So
Exactly.
it'll be worth the wait. So this is just a quick look, looking at the TIDs that we have currently in existence right now, when they started, when they're proposed to end, the 2018 fund balance, which is what Director Ellenbecker sent out in her sheet. It's negative right now, but I think one of the things, again, we've talked about is using cash to pay for things instead of going into further
Interest.
debt. I think it just benefits us and it benefits the developer in terms of not racking up those interest costs if we don't have to. And so we've been able to manage that pretty well. And again, based on the increment we have coming in, that's going to bounce back up. So then, again, trying to maximize development, you have the base value of when these TIDs were created, and then at the end of 2018, these are the values that were created. So all in all, you can see that in our tax increment districts, we've created about $350 million worth of new development. So again, it's our job to make sure we maximize
Right.
those numbers moving forward. And I think our strategy has been to be a little bit more selective about how we create and where we create our tax increment districts, doing it not only in terms of boundary, but also in terms of timing when projects are there. So these are all the resolutions that we have proposed, and I'll just run through them real quick, and then if there's any questions. And these are really to be presented to council that would authorize the Redevelopment Authority to conduct these actions. By state statute, generally the Plan Commission does tax increment districts. Within the city, there's been a history of the Redevelopment Authority doing this because they're the ones who are involved mostly in all the development agreements. And so with that, we by resolution have council designate the RDA to perform these acts. What it does, it doesn't say we're going to do them. It just says it authorizes us to explore these options.
Right.
We'll have to come back through and talk about resolutions, and things will get voted on. We'll have a public hearing here. Things will get approved by council and the Joint Review Board before they become official. But we'd like to consider TID 5, a territory amendment, potentially over in the shipyard, actually taking some properties out of TID 5 that are in right now. Those are properties that mostly the city has and don't have any value, and really there's no obligations on them. You can do overlapping TIDs, but trying to make Director Ellenbecker's life easier, not having overlapping TIDs is financially generally easier to track expenses. So we may look at taking some of those out to help create that TID 22. TID 7 and TID 8, both of these are ones where we've generally paid off most of the project expenses, or having a good idea of what the future expenses are going to be. And so we'd like to explore a process of kind of shutting these down through a sunset. And what that would do is we'd like to take any surplus we have in those tax increment districts and allocate it to TID 9. TID 9 is going to be expensive to shut down, but we need to shut it down because it's not getting any better. And it's better for us to use tax increment dollars to fund the gap than it is to have it come back and have the city put it on the levy.
Absolutely.
And so what we'd like to do is kind of set out a period where, and we're still looking at the timetable, whether this would be 19, 20, and 21, or 20, 21, and 22. But basically have an allocation amendment to go into TID 9, and then we would shut the TID down and pass an affordable housing resolution. The state allows you to keep a TID open for 1 year and put all the increment into an affordable housing fund. This would be something that we feel could really be akin to our neighborhood enhancement fund,
Right.
and it really reduce the borrowing we have to do to get that fund and really be a good source of capitalizing a fund. So we would have the allocation, we would keep the TID open for 1 year and put all the increment into an affordable housing fund, and then it would terminate the year after that. So we would probably do that for 7 and 8, with some of those funds going into 9 to help shut it down, and also the same thing for 12. The 12, the only additional expenses we see out there is we would like to prepare ourselves for the next TID out there and the expansion of the I-43 business park. And so as long as that is cash flowing, it has a pretty substantial amount of
Right.
money in the fund balance.
Yes.
We've been using that to pay for Erie Road. We've been using that to pay for the sewer extension that will enable additional development out there. So if we can use that fund, we can start a new TID out there, basically fresh, and don't have to go far in the hole on debt. TID 13, again, as I talked about for the Associated Bank lot, perhaps a territory amendment or project plan amendment to incorporate that into it. TID 14, a territory amendment to capture, they picked up a piece of the Canadian National Railroad, so to extend it. And then we'd like to extend the TID 3 years. Really, it sat for 2-3 years, not paying any taxes and just kind of in limbo, in between, things with on Broadway, Walmart discussion, and we really kind of lost time in terms of not having any type of development agreement over there. And so we'd like to extend that 3 years to be able to kind of catch up, and really also help provide some funding to pay for all that infrastructure. As we've done out in TID 12, we funded a lot of the infrastructure, and TID 14, really to turn it into that site needs that infrastructure to help it develop to its fullest. And then TID 17, as I mentioned, after some litigation issues get resolved, to terminate that, and then creating TID 22 for the shipyard and TID 23 for the Legends District.
Excellent update. I know we ask for this every year to get a good update, and it's a very good job. Very nicely done. And I see Debbie was smiling when we talk about housing.
Well,
Anyway.
I've been talking about that creation of that housing fund for a while, and I know that the city of Wausau has done some amazing stuff with their funding that they put aside for that by using tip dollars, so,
Excellent.
yeah.
Questions, comments? Great report.
It's great, yes,
Sorry against you.
very comprehensive.
So we're back to number 4 now. This is comments in regard to the report. Number 4 was a consideration with possible action resolution designated redevelopment to perform all acts necessary for creating, amending, or closing tax district TID 5, 7, 8, 9, 12, 13, 14, 17, 22, and 23. Great background information. Matt?
After that excellent report, I would make that motion, Gary.
I'll second.
Okay, motion made by Matt, a second by Debbie. Any other questions or comments? If not, we shall vote. Is it coming up? Don't have it. A verbal vote. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. Just a comment. I really appreciate all the work you guys did, in particular, all the recommendations. A lot of thought went into that, and I appreciate everybody's effort. Thanks. Number 5, consideration of possible action on a resolution adopting post-issuance compliance policy for tax-exempt conduit bonds. All right, number 5. Let's see if I can do it real quick. Who's got that?
So I can take it. So this is just a follow-up to the bonds that passed, the industrial revenue bonds for Green Bay Packaging.
Yes.
In short, without getting into too much technical, we'll follow the rules in terms of compliance moving forward. In terms of, we act as the compliance coordinator, so we just have to make sure that it doesn't impose any really financial obligations on us. It just ensures that, as you can see in the attachment, basically it's a resolution documenting that we adopted this policy.
Okay. A motion to approve.
So moved.
Motion by Alderdorf,
I'll second.
second by Matt. Questions or comments? All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, so carried. I guess we're gonna do verbal the rest of the way here. Why not? Consideration of possible action to approve a contract to build a 2-bedroom home on 900 South Greenwood Avenue and to authorize staff to sell the property when job is complete. Kevin?
That would be me. So we acquired the property at 900 South Greenwood It was in pretty rough shape, so we demolished it, and we had this lot available. Ken and Aaron have put together some plans that we used a design called the Greenwood design. And working with Jackie down in purchasing, we put together an RFP or proposal for bids to build this two-bedroom home on this site. And we had two bidders come back, and the low bidder was J.D. Melman's. And they proposed to build this house that we're proposing to sell after they're done. Well, so it's a turnkey operation for about $111.66 a square foot. They were our recommended bidder. The references checked out, and we're looking to have that done this year yet, and then allow staff to sell the property in the best interest of the RDA.
Okay. What do you think it'll sell for? Do you have any idea?
Well, in discussions with the assessors and our real estate expert, we think in the range of $80 to $100 a square foot.
Okay,
It'll be $1,800 or 1,800 square foot
Okay.
property when it's done.
okay. There's definitely a shortage of houses out there, everybody tells me. There's not much inventory, so I'm sure it'll sell quickly.
Yes, and this is a new build in an old neighborhood, so, you know, the sale of this property will be kind of an experiment for us as well to see how it goes, but we're hoping to get a high-value properties on North Broadway that were built, sold for in the 180s, and so we're hoping we can get in that range.
Questions, comments? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
I have a motion by Alder
Second.
second by Debbie. If everybody's, well, okay, we're doing voice votes. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, so carried. All right, number 7, consideration and possible action to approve the use of $19,994 in community development block grant funds for the proposed Broadway mural at 123 South Broadway, tax parcel 3-113.
That's me.
Yeah, yes.
Okay, so we received a request from On Broadway to use their escrow money, their community development block grant escrow money from the sale of the parking lot on Walnut Street. They would like to put a mural on the side of the old Du Bois Formal Wear building
Okay.
at 127 South Broadway. And in your packet, you have the proposed artist and a design concept of what they would like to do. We also have Alderman Johnson here, who's on Broadway, if you have any additional questions for him in regards to this. But this is an eligible block grant activity, and it's an eligible use of those funds that they have set aside for use on Broadway.
Okay. And that's a competitive number in our, to get the work done?
I believe so.
Go ahead, Alderman Johnson.
I mean, murals typically aren't something you do competitive bidding on.
Okay, I
It's-
know. Let me ask it another way.
That's what I was,
This will be the
Are we getting our
largest-
bang for a buck?
This will be the largest mural in the city of Green Bay.
Okay,
And yes, I mean, for the size and scope of the project,
Right.
the intricacy of the design, it's certainly within reason of what you would expect to pay an artist for that work.
all right. That's what I want to know. Questions or comments?
I like it. It's a
You like it?
Yes.
I assume that's a motion.
it is very bright.
I moved
It is
to
very
approve.
bright.
All right, and Debbie seconds it.
Yep.
All right, motion by Alder Dorf, second by Debbie. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, so carried. Number 8, consideration of possible action to approve a request for proposals for redevelopment of a parking lot located on 200 block of North Monroe Avenue. That sounds
Yeah.
exciting.
There it is.
Prime property in middle of our city.
Associated Bank lot.
Yes, hi.
Hi.
On the 200 block, and that is actually an entire city block, it's currently a parking lot, and we would like to put out an RFP for development, most likely a mixed-use development. And this is in the downtown plans, the authenticity plan, so we would like to see downtown development down there. So we are planning to ask for submissions by September and then be able to probably go to the RDA Real Estate Subcommittee and then bring a recommendation to the RDA in October for the October meeting. So this would actually be the entire city block, and we have in the RFP usually what we have in there about what they need to submit and kind of our standards and how they can find out more information about what our downtown plan says and how we hope to have residential and mixed use down there.
How long would they have to submit the RFP?
I think they need to,
3 months, maybe?
yeah, if it goes out next week,
August
it would be
30th.
submitted by, yeah, they ask they need to ask questions, yeah, by the end of August and then
Oh, wow.
submit by
Yep,
September
I see it.
13th. So it will be out for a couple months.
Okay.
Do we feel like that's enough time?
It's a lot longer than our more recent RFPs that have gone out. We are adding about probably an extra month because it's such a large site and very significant. It's actually, in our plans, we actually talk about it as a catalyst. So it's very,
No, because in my just thought on it is, wow, if a developer just finds out next week sometime and 2 weeks later designs, right, proposals are due, 2 months, that actually seems tight for such a big piece where I really want people to come with good stuff. I mean, in my head, this is just me, if we gave them another month so that people really had time to think it through, for me, that's not a big deal.
Right.
But that's just, I'm not a developer.
Right,
Our
for-
thought process was that we looked at how much time was spent with, when we looked at the Adams lot redevelopment. And though, we had some pretty substantial designs that came in a
Yes.
short period of time. This is a blank canvas.
Yep.
There's no structure there to have to worry about.
Yep.
So we thought it might actually be an easier look at that development.
Okay.
And just, I think we really would like to get a development on that site as soon as we
Agreed.
can. I think that's why we took that into consideration, so. I mean, I think if we put it out and we get nothing, we can extend it
Okay.
at that point. But we have had some interest expressed by a few people already on
Okay.
it, so, and we've been pitching the lot since we've purchased it, so.
Okay. Now, I mean, if you feel like that's enough time for folks, I obviously don't know what it takes to put a building design together. It just
I'm
seems
hoping we
like
can get some developments.
a lot.
Yeah.
So, my understanding, there's an alleyway through the middle of that, and there's a lot of public works in there.
Correct.
So, how are we bidding it? 2 pieces, 1 piece? Because if it does get to be 1 piece, there's going to be a cost by the city, right?
we talk about in here that probably looking into it, it probably will be likely that we need to keep the alley untouched. So we say, we suggest in the proposal if they want to submit plans, it should probably leave the alley open.
Okay.
And that's good for urban form too.
So it potentially could be 2 different bidders even, right? I mean,
If they choose to only do development on one part of the site
Right.
and then,
You could do it like the front facing Monroe, you'd have that mixed use, lower space retail and then apartments above potentially, but maybe that backside would be primarily housing development, a higher end housing development, so that potential is there as well.
When I go through this, I don't really see where we're making specific commitment by the city, which I think is a good thing. I mean, I'm not disagreeing with that. So they know going in that we really are not making any, although we're obviously quite interested, we would do something, but we're not promising them any commitments.
no.
Okay, that's a great thing. It's a good thing. Thoughts or comments? Staff, anybody? So how long we owned it? We haven't really owned it that long, have we, Kev?
Ink's still drying.
Yeah, I would think it is. What a great opportunity though for the city, a block right in the middle of the city, with all the potential in the world, and a clean block, like you said, is up and on. Excellent opportunity. I'm sure, Ken, you're gonna get all kind of people bidding on this, right? Or both you, the whole staff, rather. All right. So, our vote would be that we approve that we do an RFP on that piece of property.
Yeah, I'd make that motion, Gary, that we approve the RFP for
Second.
redevelopment of the parking lot.
Motion made by Matt, second by Alderdorf. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
So carried. Excellent, thank you. We covered a lot of ground today. And of course, the E1, we already talked about. RDE, a loan update, please. Yes, please.
So I have not, in my 6 years of being here, ever given you any information updating you guys on your loan, so I thought that it was about
Yes.
time.
Yes, great. Matt, you're on that committee, right? Matt, you're on the loan committee.
Well, is this the Community Development Revolving Loan Fund?
This entails that and everything else.
Everything else,
Okay,
okay.
all right, great.
So, yes, it does include the Redevelopment Authority revolving loans and also all the home loans that have been processed. So, in looking at that, I think that our portfolio is very strong. Some of these loans go back to the late 80s. So this is a look of everything that has happened through the city. We have had defaults, write-offs, and foreclosures. With any loan portfolio, you'll have that. For our residential, the total of defaults, write-offs, and foreclosures total 7.71%, which is low. Banks generally in a year time likes to keep theirs at about 5%, but we did have in 2010 the market crash, which caused most banks had a 21% default rate. So when you take into consideration that into these numbers, I think that it's a very strong portfolio, especially when we are working with people that have limited means. So that demographic was hit hard with that crash also.
So this is all the loans the city has outstanding.
Yep.
Okay.
We have 547 outstanding loans at this point just for residential, and those loans are, a lot of them, almost all of them, I believe, are deferred. So as long as you live in the property or family lives in the property, there's no payments due and no interest on those loans.
Interesting, wow. Thanks for this update. No, you're right, we've never seen this before, it's kind of neat. Interesting. Comments or questions? I don't think we really need a motion, it's just informational. Thank you. Great update. Final financial report and check register, I went over that. I don't have any questions unless somebody else does. Director's report, project updates. You guys been busy?
Yeah. Our floor's been working hard, cranking things out, so getting things done this summer. With that, I did, if the commission will allow, yield my time, John Meehan is here with Baird to talk about potentially refinancing of some of the KI2 bonds, I believe. Nothing committed yet, but just kind of exploring some options. So he's going to be presenting to Finance Committee tonight. So just wanted to kind of give you an update of something we may look at in the future.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah.
Motion to open the meeting,
So moved.
second by Deb. All those in favor, signify with aye.
Aye.
Meeting is open. Thank you.
You're gone.
You're on.
All right.
You're live.
Thank you very much. I apologize. I get a little bit of a raspy throat, but I'll work through it and answer any questions that you may have. There are a number of different issues outstanding related to KI. And I would have to go all the way back to 1999, which was the first KI issue. And that was a transaction that went through the RDA. And it has, I guess I'd call it maybe a bookend transaction, which was the Rush Center Arena. Both were done in '99. Both were supported by hotel room taxes. Both were ultimately supported by a quiet enjoyment lease with Brown County. So those issues are outstanding. They've been refunded a couple times, and right now their current existence is a 2016 issue and a 2012 through Schwab and ZBA, the 2012 for Rush, and the 2016 through the RDA for the KI-1. During this time period, there was a debt issue that was done in 2013, and that's like, if you go to my little handout here, I'll just walk through it. And the 2013 issue, which is referred to as KI-2, was a transaction really for the expansion of the KI Center. And the structure was set up that through a waterfall, which is how we describe it in bond terming, is that the hotel motel room taxes come in, they're first applied to the KI-1 and the Rush Center to make those debt service payments, which expire in 2029. And then they flow through to support the debt service payments for KI-2, the 2013 issue. Well, the 2013 issue was a taxable debt issue because of tax laws at the time pertaining to management contracts, et cetera, which I don't think we want to get into today, except that they're a taxable debt issue. They were issued in December of 2013, $24 million issue size. They're federally taxable. They're actually state exempt for state Wisconsin holders. And the structure was set up so that in the early years there were lower payments because we were working around the original issues, and then it steps up that the final payment is in 2043. So it was always set up with a 30-year amortization. The interest rates, because remember they were taxable in 2013, were from 4.9 to 6.15. I would also say that these are a quiet enjoyment lease structure, and that's why this discussion does go to the Finance Committee and ultimately the Common Council, because the lease structure is such that if there are insufficient hotel motel room taxes through that waterfall, that the lease is with the city and the city needs to make their annual lease payments. Fortunately, for the life of the issue, that hasn't been a question. That there has been sufficient room taxes in order to make those debt service payments. Those bonds from 2013 are callable in 2023. And there was a change in the tax law in 2017 that said you can no longer do, advanced refundings except of taxable issues.
Okay.
So what we're looking at here is on the next page is the possibility of doing a taxable advance refunding of the debt. The issue size, once again, to be determined, but it's about $28.7 million because we're structuring it not only to pay off the existing principal, but we have to defease a certain amount of the interest. Okay. We're not extending the debt. It still goes out to 2043, so it's the same life. But now the true interest rate is significantly lower.
Right.
It has really come down.
Yes.
We've watched this on a continuing basis and, floated the balloon and said, well, rates moved against us, let's back away. Rates will go back and forth. Well, now, and these are approximate numbers because obviously we're not selling debt today. It could reduce the annual debt service by about 160 grand a year. Now, I appreciate that. Really, it's that waterfall again, right? The hotel motel room taxes come down to make that payment. But ultimately, remember, that is a liability of the city.
Right.
So what we're doing is reducing that liability that would be out there with about 160,000 a year, that overall, it's more than $2 million of savings. The reason this is always coming together, then if you go to the next page, just want to give you an idea of where treasury rates are. Taxable debt issues are always priced against U.S. Treasuries. Investors say, well, I could buy a U.S. Treasury and sleep well at night. Anything that's not a U.S. Treasury, I expect what we call a spread to the Treasury, something higher than that. So you always look to a U.S. Treasury and say, whatever that is, as that goes up and down, the prices of taxable debt go up and down. If you look at the chart, we have both a maroon colored and a blue colored, and what we try to do is when from left to right, when the issues were done back in 2013, where we are now, and just sort of a point of interest is that compared to where we are now, the current rate, rates have really only dropped below that a few times over this, basically this time period, the past 6 years, that they have come down like this. So we are looking at it and saying, the trend is right. It may all change in a week. It may change in a month. If I could tell you where rates would be, I wouldn't be here. But it's a matter of getting it in a position to take advantage of the fact that these rates are falling. When you look at the next page, I appreciate these are a lot of numbers. On the left side, that's what the net room taxes are projected to be going out into the future. That was done by a firm called HVS when the Expo financing was completed. That was part of the financing structure. The 2012 issue, which is really the Rush Center, the 2016 issue, which is KI-1, all have first call on that revenue. And you can see it's a significant revenue to debt service amount. So for example, in 2020, there's projected to be about $5.6 million of revenue and about $3.7 million of debt service. That waterfall means that that excess money goes to KI-2, the 2013 issue. And so without any structuring changes to it, the way it works right now is that there's significant coverage, there has been, to make the debt service payment on these issues.
Great.
On the next page, I just have a hypothetical review of if you keep to the same life, 2043, if you replace the old interest rates with the new interest rates, after all the costs that go with it, your savings is about 160, I think, I said a year. All these numbers will change. They'll change. I did it tomorrow morning. They'll be different than they are today.
Right.
But this gives you a concept of where the numbers flow.
Mm-hmm. Good.
At the back, I have a draft timetable for action of the RDA. I would say that there will be a come back to you at some point, but between then and now, there needs to be not only discussion with the city, because once again, they're ultimately on the hook for the debt, but there needs to be the preparation of the bond documents, get the attorneys together, go to the rating agencies. Fortunately, a lot of the material is already under creation because the city has their normal borrowing, the water utility has borrowing, so there's already information gathered. Rating agencies are already had discussions about city debt, frankly, about this type of debt. So a lot of this is, we're on dual tracks. But ultimately, this would come back to the RDA at a future date.
More than likely, time is of the essence.
I'm always one that says if I know I've got the bird,
Right.
I take it, I move.
Yeah.
I would add that one thing to be aware of is that right now, that debt that's out there is callable in 23, and so any refunding, we would change that call date. We would push it out. The investors would expect more of a call date. Well, you give that up to take this money today.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one change to it, but otherwise, it's basically the same structure, subject to the city rating, of course. But yeah, I would convene the working group now. I would be going right now.
Okay. Thank you.
And I apologize, I know this has come late.
That's
I think,
okay.
I appreciate Kevin and getting this on the director's report. I think with the 4th of July and everything going on, we probably didn't get it in your hands as quickly as I should have.
Questions, comments? Finance Director, you comfortable with this?
Yes.
That's a short answer. Good.
Just one thing to keep in mind, that we will have to have probably some discussions with the county, because it also affects their whole water flow.
All right.
That they have designed that this money will roll into their expo hall, and then all their documents, I'm not sure if they need to be updated, probably not, but we have to keep the county into consideration.
Yep. Questions by the committee? Comments? Anything else in the director's report? Been
No,
busy?
I've talked enough today.
Thank you.
Excellent. Next meeting is August 13th. Motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
Matt, Alder Dorf, all those in favor, saying aye. 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 We are adjourned. Thank you.